Hi everybody, welcome to a short and hopefully sweet video about how to do the questions response to readings. So first off, I want to encourage you guys, this is an assignment that is going to really help your grade. It's not hard to do, it just takes a little bit of thought, and this video will explain how to do it. So just a little bit of background here. So you will upload your Word document into Canvas just twice a semester. So while every class there's reading assignments, you'll work on your questions response to readings, which I'll explain here in just a minute. But you'll just save those on a running Word document. You're not going to be turning those in every class. You only will turn them in kind of the midterm and at the end of the semester, just twice. So you have a running Word document based on the reading assignment, but you only will turn it in twice. So, okay, so here's how you do it. So you want to create a Word document, and the cover page on it will look like what you see in front of you. So you'll put questions, response to readings. There we go. Get my cursor going. You'll put questions, response to readings for, and then you'll put in the two books, Anthony Everett's Augustus, right there. And your second book, Andrea Overfield's The Human Record, Sources in Global History, Volume 1 to 1500, which you guys have right here. So make sure you guys put the author's name there and then put the title in italics and separate the title from the subtitle with the colon you see right here. So you just follow just like what you guys see there. Then you'll pop in your name right there, and then you'll put in my name, our class, section number. By the way, that one is not us, so don't copy that one, but the appropriate one for our class. Then obviously the date, and that's not obviously not our date either, but you'll put the date in on the due date. Again, it'll be probably either the midterm or the final. Just check modules, you'll see the due date. Okay, so once you have your cover page down, here's what the running document will look like, and here's my sample for you guys. So let's suppose the reading assignment was for January 27th in my sample, and on that day, Anthony Everett's Augustus Chapter 2 was due, and same thing, you had a reading in the Human Record, Epic of Gilgamesh. By the way, Epic of Gilgamesh is a fantastic read. In any case, that's for another day. So most of you will be creating two questions based on those two reading assignments that are due on that day. In this case, in my sample, January 27. So you have two questions based on Augustus Chapter 2. And then you have two questions based on the other assignment that was also due that day, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh in your textbook, The Human Record. Now, the good news for you guys, let me reassure you guys, these questions you don't answer. It's very important. So you're not like, okay, I got to come up with a question and I have to have an answer. No. You guys know it's in the sample, right? The questions are there. There's no answer. You guys do not answer them. In fact, if you know the answer, that should not be your question. This is simply a legitimate question as you're reading Chapter 2, which turned out to be on the great uncle, who by the way is Julius Caesar. As you're reading that chapter, unless you are Julius Caesar himself or a similar Roman, there'll be things in that chapter when you come across something like, I don't understand like that little part right there. Like why would they have done that? Okay, perfect. By the way, and you don't know the answer to that. You're just honestly thinking as you're reading, you come across something like, why would the Romans culturally have done this? I don't get it. Or why would this individual have done this? Like, I see what he's up to. I see what she's thinking. But they did this, and I don't get that. Or whatever it is. Perfect. That is your question. Right? So in this case, sample we see from Chapter 2, the great uncle, says both Marius and Sulla seized power in Rome through military force, as Julius Caesar would do a generation later. Why was it that Julius Caesar has become a household name while Marius and Sulla are little remembered outside of brief subjects of study in a history class? There you go. By the way, you're like, I don't know the answer to that. Perfect. That's your question. Again, the whole point of the questions is to engage you with the reading as if you were in class. Now, again, you guys are online, but if you're in class or in person, doesn't matter. But to help you engage with the reading and get you thinking. And you're like, I would like to know this. And again, you don't know the answer to it, but you're like, I'm curious. Same thing for that second question, right? See Chapter 2, the great uncle. If the diehard consul Marcellus, alarmed at Caesar's unconscionable acts and desiring Caesar to be eliminated, Had not forced a showdown with Caesar, could Rome have avoided the terrible civil war that ended the Republic? Again, like, well, because Marcellus forced the showdown with Caesar. What if he would have left Caesar alone? Would Caesar then have marched on Rome and led to the complete overthrow of the Republic? Maybe Caesar never would have done that. So was that harsh ultimatum that Caesar feared, did that set in motion that sad chain of events that leads to the fall of the Republic? So did Marcellus kind of start this? And obviously, not take away responsibility from Julius Caesar, of course, but did Marcellus, with this very aggressive ultimatum, did he provoke a crisis that then spun out of control? Again, I don't know. Okay, there you go. That's your question. And let me get a couple more examples here, because again, I want to make this thing short. But let me do one from the Epic Gilgamesh, from your text for the record. What was Gilgamesh and Enkidu's insult to the goddess Ishtar? Because when you guys read page 9 in there, the editors will describe how Gilgamesh and Enkidu, his wild bro buddy, that they did something that insulted the goddess Ishtar. But ironically and surprisingly, they don't explain what they did. I want to know what they do. I have no idea what they did. I'm curious. What would they do? Perfect. That's your question. Okay, so that would be for that day. You see, you have your questions because you had one chapter reading Augustus, then you had one reading there in the human record, and you have two questions. Now, for those of you who are verbally participating in class, either in person, that you ask questions in class in person, or online, that you attend the Zoom class, you're only required to do one question. Most of you, though, will not be there for the Zoom class, or in class, in an in-person class, you would not be there, you'd be there, but you wouldn't be asking questions directly. In that case, you do two. So, for almost all of you listening to this video, you guys will be doing two questions per reading. In this case, you were assigned on January 27. Again, your semester dates will be different, but this applies to whatever semester. Two questions from that chapter, then two from the other textbook. And there will be two questions a day. You'd save it on this Word document, hold on to it, and then here's your next day. And I won't go over that one, but again, you'll be reading chapter 3 for the next class period. There is your two questions from chapter 3, and then there's your two questions from the next reading, which is, in this case, is the judgment of Hammett Rabbi. Again, you just keep saving your classes all the way up to the midterm or the final. At that point, you'll upload this whole document along with, obviously, your cover page, and you upload it with your questions. It's important for you guys to follow format, so follow it just like what you guys see here. So put the date, make sure that's critically important. You guys put the date, then put Anti-Everest Augustus, put a little bullet point there, put it in chapter 4, 10, whatever chapter you're doing, your two questions. Also critically important, and this is very important, make sure you guys put in the page number. So what page number did you, as you're reading, did you come across that prompted that question? Like, oh man, I should ask this. Perfect. Just pause wherever you are, have your laptop, whatever you guys got handy, write your question out, and then put the page number. You guys see that? So when I grade these, what I'm looking for is, okay, did they put the date there? Does that match the schedule? Okay, great. Did they put the textbook and the author? Great. And then, okay, I can see the two questions. Good. And then they put the page number. Sometimes, by the way, you guys come up with very good questions. So when I grade them, I want to, that's a really good one. I want to go fact check that. I want to go look it up. Put the page number that prompted that question. You see that? If you do all those and your questions are thoughtful, you get all the points. Your questions do not have to be, you don't have to have a PhD in history to answer these questions. I just want you to just be genuinely thoughtful. That's all you got to do. Be genuinely thoughtful. Don't ask a question like, how many pages are in this chapter? The only reason I ever grade a question down is I can see based on the question that no thought was put in the question. I want a genuine question you don't know. One more thing before I wrap this up and make this short. Don't ask a question like, who is Julius Caesar? Well, you're reading about him here. You don't ask that question. Be thoughtful. Show me that you read the chapter, and based on reading the chapter, you came up with a natural question that you're wondering about. As long as you do that, you're good. You get all kinds of questions, but don't ask a question like a duh question, for example, maybe you ask a question from the first page in the chapter, but that question is answered itself by this author later in the chapter. So I can tell when I read your question, clearly you didn't read the chapter. So the question reveals your thoughtful analysis of the chapter, and it's a good question. Again, I don't want you guys sweating for a long time. Just be thoughtful. Just as you read, come across something like, the author does not explain this, but I would like to know, like, why did they do this? Perfect, that's your question. Put the page number there, you're good to go. You'll get all the points. Just keep saving this. It should really help your grade. Just make sure you guys follow format carefully, like I showed you guys right here in the sample. Be thoughtful with your questions. Show by the question that as you first of all, you read the chapter, and that you generally, as you were reading it, thought about it, came up with a good, thoughtful question. Again, questions can be all kinds of questions. I don't grade them based on that. The only reason I would grade them down is I see based on the question, no thought was spent there, and also I can tell you didn't read the chapter because the question you asked was clearly answered later in the chapter. See what I'm saying? Otherwise, you guys are good. This would be very good for you guys' grade. I promised you, short and sweet. I will try to keep my promise to you by wrapping it up right now. So do a good job, guys. Follow the format. Keep up with this. Be very helpful for your grade, and also hope you enjoy the reading as you process it. So take care, everybody.